All right, class number 7. Apparel, surface textures, facial features, and so on. All right, so apparel. So obviously you don't want your character to be naked, unless you do, which that's cool, but probably not. First thing I would say is make sure that your figure itself should have what we call like landmarks. Generally, they're something called bony landmarks, and basically these are anatomy that you can see regardless of who the individual is. Okay, they can be a large person, they could be a small person, you know, thin, not so thin. Generally, all these features should be viewable. Okay, so for one, obviously the ramus of the jaw, right? You can pretty much see everybody's jaw. Now I know you might be like, oh, what if they got like big jowls or something? You can still sort of define it. You can still see it in there. They might act a little bit differently. You can always see a person's pit of the neck / clavicles. The costal arch is always present. Now again, you're gonna be like, well, what if they're a really large person? If you take a very large person, what you'll notice is they might have a belly, okay? But their belly will start basically where the costal arch is. Like it'll come out from there. Now, if you have someone who's like super thin, like too thin, the belly will come in starting right there. But you can always see a hint of the costal arch regardless of the figure, okay? The anterior superior iliac spines and inguinal furrow, that's that line that comes across here. That's basically the front bumps of your ilium. And then there's the inguinal ligament, and it creates this nice kind of round area just above the genitals. Okay, obviously the patella and the tibial tuberosity. So the patella is obviously the knee bone, and the tibial tuberosity is that it's kind of the pointed end of the tibia at the top. Okay, the malleoli here. So we have the medial and lateral. So medial being on the inside, lateral being on the outside. It's just the knuckles of your ankle. Scapula, the medial furrow, which is basically the back line, right? Which is in between your sacrospinalis group and multifidus. You also on the front, which I don't think I put in there, the linea alba you can usually see, which is, you know, the line between your pecs and your rectus abdominis, whatever that's called, your stomach muscles. You could see that too in the front, this line here. Okay, so that's the linea alba. Medial furrow is in the back. The olarcanon process, that's just your elbow. Posterior iliac spines, it's little bumps on the back of your iliums. In most cases, those will be like dimples. Unless someone's an anorexic, then again, if they're way too thin, then it'll stick out. Navel cleft is the butt cheek. Okay. The poplita fossa is basically your knee pit, and the calcaneal tendon, obviously. The calcaneus is the back of the foot. If you want to see a slideshow of nudes and covered models, like if you want to do drawings and stuff, you can click on this, which is just a cool little tool I found. And you can choose, and I'll just do only covered models in this case. We'll do both. Now you can do all the same length. You do class mode. Class mode, what it'll do is it'll start with, well, actually hover over it. It'll start with short poses to like get you warmed up, and then it'll do longer poses. So we'll just do all the same length. I'm just gonna do 30 seconds. All right, or you can do custom and hit get drawing, and it's gonna give you these poses. And if you look, this is a really cool pose, right? And you can use this, and you just sketch real quick, and you draw. And click on the next one. You can sketch and draw. There's another one. Like that's a cool pose, right? And most of these are like things that you would see. And you can see like the anatomy is pretty nice. You can see the form pretty well. That one's not very good. But like this guy, you know, you can see his muscles and stuff. It's pretty nice. Yeah, I don't like that one as much. Ninja dude. It's kind of hard to see with his clothing on there. This guy's not too bad. It's kind of a cool pose, right? So they're generally dynamic poses. And usually they have form-fitting clothes or not a lot of clothes. Like these are pretty nice. You can see a lot of the anatomy and stuff. So that tool might be useful for you. Click on that. All right, so clothing. So first and foremost, you want to make sure that you include those regardless of what you're drawing or sculpture or whatever it is. The main thing I would say to you about clothing is that what you're going to want to do is just use reference. I mean, that's what we're going to get to at the end of this. But generally what you're going to notice is that the clothing generally in cloth doesn't have much of a form on its own. as soon as you drop it, it just lays flat on the ground, right? It just becomes a pile of clothes. It doesn't really, it forms to whatever is around it. So generally what that means is that it's going to be affected by the wearer, what's underneath, and by the gravity. By those two elements basically competing with each other. The gravity wants to pull it down, your body wants to keep it up, okay? So what you're going to generally notice is that wherever there's stress, which would be wrinkles, it's going to be wherever they're always going to expand out from where it's being pulled at. So if you look at my sleeves here, you can see that there's wrinkles pulling off. You can see here, there's generally wrinkles coming from up here and down, right? Same thing here around the crotch area. Again, stress here. I wish I had a back one. It gets a little bit harder when, if you look at here, this is almost being supported by underneath. So you get these weird kind of scaffolding folds, right? This kind of interesting folding going on here, which is really hard to predict, honestly, and it's kind of dependent on the cloth itself. This is when, if you're going to be modeling your character as jeans or khakis or whatever, I highly suggest just go on YouTube and look up, like, just, I don't know, pants or something, or people wearing pants, I guess. I don't know. I think most people wear pants anyway. You know, well, it's supposed to skirts or something. But be aware that different cloth actually affects things differently. So I did this as a simulation. What you're going to notice is that the silk cloth, it forms much tighter, much more wrinkly, and you get a lot of artifacts here, right? The cotton is a little bit tighter, but if we get to like something more like leather, and I just changed the numbers about, it gets this more rigid, thicker, rounder feel, okay? So depending on the cloth, it's going to affect the way that it wrinkles, okay? So that is what I would suggest with that. All right, so surface texture, I'm just going to cover this real quick, so I'm just going to go to ZBrush, and we'll just do ZBrush. And the best way to get surface texture, so obviously surface texture is just the minute, smaller details of an object, right, of the surface, right? It's the smaller end elements. It's not big. It's not stuff that's going to affect the silhouette. It's more stuff that just affects the actual surface that you see. So I'm just going to grab, that's a demo. We'll grab this chick. I'm just going to double click on it so you can kind of see. Okay. So first off, obviously, if you look at it, she's not high enough poly. So I got to make sure that I'm high enough poly to work on her. So I'm just going to go to geometry. I'm just going to divide it a bunch so I can see it. Okay. So the best way to get a texture on something is you can try to manually do it by using these alphas, and these are fine. You know, like for some things, like this one's really good for wrinkles. If I hold Alt and cut across, oh, not, hang on a second. Let me take this intensity down. And kind of, sorry, kind of cut across here, and cut back and forth, you'll see that it gets kind of a neat, I need to subdivide this again. It's gonna take, okay. It creates kind of these nice sort of wrinkles that you would kind of see in a neck, right? Like, you know, inside of your fingers and things like that. You have that kind of texture. So you can kind of play around with these if you want to try and get texture. And there's different options here. Like for instance, I could grab this one and I could instead use spray, okay? And then I could take my stroke, and I could go to, not modifiers, where are you? Mouse input average count. Maybe it's underneath this. Mouse average. Flow variance. I wanted the stepping to be more. Maybe it's under brush. Curve depth samples. Wow. I could brush this across. Let me make this bigger now, because now it's like. And you can see you could kind of draw this ugly skin about, right? Or even, instead of using this, come on, use like the drag dot thing. And I could kind of, you know, very, very precisely kind of place these and do that, okay? And that's fine, and that's cool and everything. And you can you can import, come on, different alphas too. So I could import, I could find an alpha. I don't know if I got anything on my desktop here. I guess we'll try this one, see what happens. Alright, so now I got this. And you'll see that now that's my alpha. Okay, so it just needs to be a black and white picture. And you can see there it is. It's automatically just fading. But yeah, so you can make your own alphas if you want. And brush those on instead. Instead, I'm going to turn that off. Okay, and you could utilize that. But probably a better way of doing this is actually using the tool up here, the spotlight. Okay, so what you can do is you can import a picture, which is probably what you're going to want to do. And let me see if I can find something a little bit better than that. I don't really have any pictures here. I guess I'll use this one. So just grab that. It's kind of the same thing I already had. I can import a picture into my so underneath texture, import the picture. So I'll select it here, okay. Or you can select one that's already in here, but I'm going to select it here. Then we want to turn it on. We want to add there we go. Add to spotlight. That's going to add it to the spotlight tool. There you go. So select the picture, hit the little add button here, turn that off. Okay, and so now I have this thing going on here, and this might be a little confusing, but basically it has this here, and if I hit Z, that'll make this tool open and close, okay? But this will remain where it is. Okay, so that's Z. If I hit Shift Z, turns both of them off, and it just goes back to regular sculpting. Okay, but if I want it back, I hit Shift Z, and it comes back. Oops, and I apparently was moving it without realizing it. Okay, and I'll just tap Z. So Shift Z is off and on. Z turns the this little thing on here. Now, there's different tools over here. So right off the bat, one of the things I'm going to do is I can't actually see my model very well. So I'm going to go to where the opacity is, right here. I'm going to click on that, and I'm just going to drag that to the left. Okay, so you just click and you drag, and it's going to lower the opacity so I can see through it. It'll still work the same, but I can see it a little bit better. The other thing to do is, I'll just show you this. If I click just anywhere, really, it will move that thing, okay? That's why you can see I can't actually brush on it when this is on. So when I actually to brush, I have to turn it off, okay? And you can do other things too. I can adjust the hue of the picture that I'm using. I could paint, I guess, on it. I've never done that. The spotlight radius, right? We don't really need that. The scale of it, I can change the scale, so I'll make it a little bit smaller so it's a little bit easier to work with. There's all sorts of different things you can play around with. You can nudge it. So if I want to warp it a little bit, it'll allow me to kind of almost like liquefy. I can push the picture around. So if it doesn't match, let's say I'm trying to do like an eye, I got a texture of an eye, and it doesn't match my model perfectly. Like I'm trying to match it here and it doesn't match my model. I can nudge I could put this picture over here and then use that nudge and nudge it around. Anyway, so let's say I'm happy with that. What I can do now is actually I'll make this bigger a little bit again. Okay. And let's move it here. I'll hit Z to turn that off. And then I can actually start sculpting on it. And then when I sculpt, it's going to use that picture, as terrible as it is, as a... Now notice it's overlapping because I have the grid snap, or the whatchamacallit there. I can actually use that to sculpt with. And you see you get a nice little texture. So I could find an image of like, you know, what do you call it? Like follicles and things like that, and actually use that to sculpt with. You can actually even use it to color with. I can turn this off and do MRGB, and then when I paint, it'll actually will paint that color onto it. I mean, I could do both at the same time, really. Oh, it's not. Hang on a second. I gotta move this down. Just tap Z again, and then it's both doing. You can't really see the sculpt too much. It's both doing the sculpt and it's doing, I don't know if you can see it. It's doing the sculpt and it's doing the color at the same time. Okay? So, if I wanted to add, like, let's say, follicles or something to this, I want to make this look better, right? So I'm just going to erase all that or undo everything I did because it looks muy malo. What I would do is minimize this. Just go over here. Let's go Google, okay? And look up, skin texture. Okay, then we'll go images, and then I can find a texture that I think would work for my skin here. So kind of like this one. Select that one. It's got this bad thing underneath, but I'll just save this. Save image as. Save it to my desktop for now. That's fine. Hit save. Okay, go back here. I'm going to go to the texture, and I am going to go ahead and import. Select that. Open. Texture. And then I have to select it here, and I have to add it to the spotlight. Now it's in the spotlight. Okay? Turn this back off. And then I can move it to where I want. So let's just say I'm going to take this and scale it down because it's a little bit too big. And I'm just going to put it kind of, let's see, let me get a little closer here. Okay. I'm going to put it roughly, and then we'll make it bigger now. Let's say something like this, okay? I'm going to put it like in here. Let's just tap Z off. And I'm not going to do color on this quite yet. I'm just going to do the Z add. And I'm just going to go ahead and hang on a second, my whatchamacallit's a little bit much. So, and I'm just going to go ahead and use that. Now it's too little. And use it to kind of sculpt with. Now I got to be careful when I get to the edges there, as you can see. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Alright, and then I'll hit Z, and I'll just pull this down here a little bit to move it. Wow. Okay. And if you look real close, you can see I did a bad job, but it has that texture on it. Okay. And so that works really well if you're like doing a lizard. You can let like lizard skin or things like that. And that's basically how people are doing those really high-res details. And you can use it for all sorts of things. You could just take a literal picture, a really high-res picture, frontal view of yourself, and then use it as this thing here. And you would be good to go. So, tile unified. Let's keep this one. I want to tell you grid. Well, anyway, let's try that. But that's basically what that tool is for. That's the surface texture, okay? So that's how you'd want to apply a surface texture to the surface, and you could make it look a lot cooler.